I never imagined a house could feel this hollow. Not after a lifetime of laughter, Sunday breakfasts, and the low hum of my husband's favorite records echoing through the hallway. Now, silence was my only companion, and even that felt too loud. Mark, passed 6 months ago. Cancer, swift, brutal, and merciless. One day we were talking about what flowers to plant in the spring. The next, I was picking out his suit for the casket. My son Daniel barely spoke at the funeral. He stood like a statue, staring past the mourners, his eyes dry. 21 and suddenly shouldering a grief I couldn't fix for him. Since then, he'd become a stranger in his own home, slipping in late at night, eating in his room, avoiding my gaze as if guilt hung behind it. I tried to make excuses. He's young. He's hurting, I whispered to myself while folding his laundry, clinging to the faint scent of his detergent as though it might lead me back to the boy I raised. But something in his silence unnerved me. It wasn't just sorrow. It was distance, measured, deliberate, and cold. One evening, while tidying the living room, I noticed Daniel's phone vibrating on the coffee table. I wasn't snooping, just startled. I glanced at the screen. No name, just a message. Preview. You can't let her find out. It will destroy her. My heart stuttered. Who was her? And what truth was so devastating that it had to remain hidden? Called his name gently. No answer. He was already halfway up the stairs, earphones in, pretending not to hear. I stood in place for several minutes after, holding a cushion to my chest like it might stop the spiraling thoughts. I wanted to believe. It was nothing. I needed to believe that. That night, I stared at the ceiling until dawn. A week later, my college friend Chloe dropped by. She'd been my rock these past few months, always arriving with warm pastries and warmer words. You look tired. She said softly, brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear. I forced a smile. Grief ages you, doesn't it? She offered her usual advice. Take a trip, sell the house, distract yourself. But I couldn't. This house still held Mark's voice. His books remained untouched on the shelf, his slippers still tucked neatly beneath the bed. I wasn't ready to erase him from the corners of my life. She asked about Daniel. I hesitated, then offered a neutral answer. He's coping, in his own way. Chloe's eyes flickered for a moment. Something unreadable. I almost missed it, but I did not forget. That evening, as I cleaned the attic looking for old photo albums, I found a small wooden box I didn't recognize. It was tucked behind a stack of Mark's university journals. Dust-covered. Locked. Curiosity gnawed at me. I searched Mark's desk drawer for spare keys. Nothing fit. A strange feeling washed over me. Part ache, part instinct. The kind that tells you a storm is coming before you hear the thunder. When Daniel returned later that night, I asked if he recognized the box. His eyes locked on it, and for a fleeting second, fear flashed across his face. No, he said too quickly. Must be Dad's old junk. But Mark never locked anything away from me, not once in our 22 years of marriage. We had no secrets. Now, it seemed, I was drowning in them. As I climbed into bed, the box tucked beneath my arm like a buried truth waiting to breathe. I couldn't shake Daniel's voice from earlier that day. The tightness in his tone. The way he didn't even ask what was inside. Something had changed, not just after Mark's death, but before. Something I never saw, or refused to see. And now, it was clawing its way to the surface. I laid in the dark and whispered aloud. What are you hiding from me, Daniel? The only answer was silence, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt dangerous. The next morning, I awoke with a weight in my chest and the wooden box still on my nightstand, its lock catching the sunlight like a taunt. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the street come alive. A mailman passed. A dog barked 2 houses down. Everything outside was normal, but inside was a battlefield of questions, and none of them had answers. Later, that afternoon, I returned to the attic, not to escape the box, but to understand it. Something had changed in me overnight. I was no longer just grieving. I was searching. Behind a stack of old newspapers and winter quilts, I found something unexpected. A sealed envelope. Cream-colored. My name written on it in Mark's handwriting. My breath hitched. I slid down against a wall and opened it, hands trembling. Emma, if you're reading this, I didn't make it, and that alone breaks my heart. But what pains me more is the feeling I couldn't shake in my final months. Something was wrong, not with my body, though that failed me too, but with someone close to us. I can't prove anything. I wasn't even sure, but I saw whispers in eyes, glances that lingered too long. Emma, if something ever seems off, trust your gut. Not everyone who smiles at you deserves your trust. Don't be afraid to look where it hurts. To Mark. The letter fluttered in my lap as though it had life of its own. My eyes scanned it again and again, searching for more, begging for names, clues, anything. But Mark was always cautious, even in doubt. He had felt it. The shift, the betrayal. And now, 6 months later, I felt it too. But I was too late to ask him who he meant. Was it Leo, Chloe, or Daniel? The thought hit me like a slap. No, not Daniel. He was just a boy grieving, lost in his own shadow. But Mark's words echoed, haunting and sharp. Don't be afraid to look where it hurts. That night, Daniel didn't come home. No call, no message. I waited. 1 hour, 2. Midnight passed. I sat curled up on the couch, Mark's letter, clutched in my hands like a shield. Finally, at 1:43 a.m., the door creaked open. Daniel stepped in, smelling faintly of smoke and cold air. Where were you? I asked softly, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. He paused. Out with friends. I stared at him. Which friends? He shrugged. Just people. No names, no detail, just walls. Daniel, I said, standing, is there something you want to tell me? He froze, then turned slowly. What do you mean? There's something going on. I'm not blind. I'm not stupid. His eyes narrowed. You're grieving. You're imagining things. That cut deeper than I expected. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not from anger, but pain. I pulled Mark's letter from my pocket and held it up. Your father wasn't imagining it? He felt it too. Whatever it was. His jaw clenched. You went through his things? I ignored the deflection. Daniel, is there something I should know? His silence answered me. He looked away. You should stop digging. Mom, it won't help. And with that, he turned and walked to his room. The door closed behind him, not with a slam, but with a soft, final thud, almost like a goodbye. Sleep evaded me that night. I sat up, staring at the wooden box again. It felt heavier now, not because of its contents, but because of what opening it might mean. I remembered the times Daniel would crawl into my bed after a nightmare, his tiny fingers gripping mine, his voice trembling. Don't leave me, Mama. When did that little boy become a man who spoke to me like a stranger? And more importantly, what had I missed along the way? By dawn, I made my decision. I walked into Daniel's room, found his desk drawer half open. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of old receipts and textbooks, was a small brass key. My hand shook as I slipped it into the box's lock. A gentle click echoed in the room, quiet but thunderous to me. I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, and one photograph, folded and worn. What I saw in that photograph shattered the fragile image of my world. The photograph slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the floor. I stared at it, unwilling to believe what my eyes were telling me. Daniel and Chloe. Together. Not a family snapshot. Not something innocent. This was intimate. His hand on her thigh, her lips near his cheek, both caught mid-laughter in a way that only lovers laughed. The timestamp in the corner of the photo made my stomach twist. 4 months before Mark died. I reached into the box and pulled out the letters, each one folded neatly and tied with a thin ribbon. I opened the first. The handwriting was Chloe's. Her words curled across the paper like smoke, soft and poisonous. I can't stop thinking about last night. I know it's wrong. God, it's so wrong. But when I'm with you, I feel alive again. You're the only one who sees me. Page after page, the affair unraveled in ink. Secret meetings, confessions, a growing obsession masked as love. In one letter, she begged him to stop. In another, she admitted she couldn't. By the third letter, I wasn't even crying anymore. I was numb. And then came Daniel's letters. His were shorter, colder. You said you loved me. You promised we'd be together after Dad passed. If you leave now, I'll tell her everything. Don't test me. Each word was a hammer to the memory of the boy I raised. My son. My Daniel. The one who used to kiss my cheek goodnight and cry over scraped knees. How had I missed this descent? I stayed in bed the entire day, the box beside me, the letters like a weight on my chest. Chloe had looked me in the eyes, hugged me, comforted me, while sleeping with my son. And Daniel? He'd betrayed his father's memory, our family, and me. By evening, I heard his steps approaching. I didn't call him. I didn't speak. I waited. The door creaked open. "You didn't come down all day," he said. "You okay?" I turned slowly to face him. I could see the flicker of guilt flash in his expression when his eyes found the open box on my lap. "You found them," he whispered. I nodded. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his voice low. "I never wanted you to know like this." "There was no right way, Daniel," I said. "No version of this that wouldn't destroy me." He looked at his hands. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did." "Don't insult me," I snapped, more venom in my voice than I recognized. "You were old enough to know better. She was my friend. Your father was dying." He stood abruptly. "I was angry, okay? He was slipping away and no one talked about it. You were always with him like I didn't exist. Chloe. She listened. She saw me." I clenched my fists. "She used you." His jaw tightened. "Maybe, but I used her too." There it was. The confession. Raw. Unapologetic. And I didn't know who this version of him was. I looked into his eyes, searching for the boy I loved. The boy I rocked to sleep, who wore superhero pajamas and once cried when a baby bird fell from a tree. But he was gone. And in his place stood someone I didn't recognize. That night, I texted Chloe. "I know everything. Don't ever come near me or my house again." No reply. I didn't expect one. In the days that followed, I went through the motions. Cooking, cleaning, breathing. But everything felt artificial. Like I was mimicking life rather than living it. Daniel stayed at a friend's. He didn't say goodbye. And strangely, I didn't ask him to stay. One morning, I stood at the edge of the garden Mark once tended. The soil was dry. The flowers had wilted in my absence. I knelt, digging into the dirt with my hands. I wasn't planting anything. I was burying the box, the photo, the letters, the weight. As the earth closed over them, I whispered, "You don't get to live in this house anymore. You don't get to rot inside me." I stood, and for the first time in months, the air didn't feel suffocating, just still. But stillness, I'd learned, could be a beginning.